Hello, you, Tube. Welcome to a genteel black hole, the home of my bookish rambles. My name's Ali, and you may certainly not call me Al. Well, it's the beginning of a new year, so I think it's high time for a breakdown of my reading from the last year, that is. So I'm going to go through a general overview of everything I read in the year, and then I'll discuss some highlights and lowlights as well. So if we bring up the very attractive looking charts here, I put minutes of work into this. You will see, or if you do a quick bit of maths, you can work out that I read 83 new books in the last year, of which 59 were new to me and 24 were rereads. I also DNF'd 8 books. The format breakdown, there were 60 ebooks. A lot of those are because I read a lot in bed at night, so I need it to be on my phone. And then there's also 13 paperbacks, 6 hardbacks, and a further 4 from the library. Then the genre breakdown, we've got 28 sci-fi, 19 crime/espionage, 18 fantasy, 11 children's/YA, 4 plays, 3 non-fiction, a couple of graphic novels, a couple of general fiction, 2 horror books, and 1 poetry. And now if we have a look at my most read authors of the year, and I've color-coded it for new reads and rereads, so you'll be able to see that right at the top there, predictably for me, was Terry Pratchett with 11 in total. Just below that was 10 Agatha Christie, and then there were 7 by Connie Willis, 5 by Douglas Adams. They were all rereads for Douglas Adams. I don't think there's anything left of Douglas Adams that would be new to me. Then we got 4 by Becky Chambers, 3 by Ursula K. Le Guin. There would have been more from Le Guin, but a couple of the DNFs were hers. Sorry, Ursula. And also 3 for John le Carré and for William Shakespeare. And then a couple of A.A. Milne, Arthur C. Clarke, and H.G. Wells. One last little bit of housekeeping. The longest book I read of the year was Passage by Connie Willis. The shortest was The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. And the oldest was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and that's not counting a reread of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by the author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And the newest book was Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. So that probably gives you some idea of the sort of stuff that I read. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's go straight on to my favourite rereads of the year. I've split my list up into rereads and new reads. Particularly liked his work with the Velvet Underground. No, that's terrible. So at the end of the video, I'm going to cover my favourite new reads of the year, but first I'd like to do a couple of highlights of my rereads of the year. I'm not going to cover all of them, but there were just a couple that I wanted to discuss in particular, not necessarily because they were the best things I read, but maybe because they improved the most for me. And the thing that improved the most for me on rereading was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Now, one of my favourite things about Agatha Christie is the feeling you get at the end of a book when the solution is revealed and you get to go, I never guessed that, but I should have. And the weird thing about The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, when I first read it, was I didn't get that feeling at all. What I get was, well, how was I supposed to get that? And so I ended up feeling kind of cheated by it. I felt like she wasn't really playing fair with me. But when I reread it, knowing the ending already, and I'm going to try and avoid spoilers here in case you haven't read it and want to, but it really improved on reread because I was able to appreciate the subtle ways that the truth was concealed, that a lot of what you needed to know was actually in plain sight, but just your attention was diverted from it. So it really increased my appreciation of it quite a lot when I reread it. Now, another thing that really improved for me on rereading was The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Now, I was a massive fan of the Cosgrove Hall stop motion animation adaptation from the 80s, I think, when I was a kid, the one with David Jason as Mr. Toad. But I never actually read the book until I grew up. But I've now read it like 4 times because I just love it. But there always used to be a caveat with that there were a couple of chapters that I just felt were a bit of a slog or a bit of a drag, didn't really interest me that much. And the interesting thing about rereading it this time was that I actually ended up really liking those chapters. And one of them actually ended up being one of my favourite moments of the book, which I just thought was quite interesting. That I guess it was just waiting for me to find it, as it were. And it took me four readings to get to it, but I finally found an appreciation for those other chapters. So that's got to be high on my list. Moving on, a couple of dishonourable mentions. Some of my least favourite books of the year. I'm going to go from sort of least bad to worst. So starting off at the just sort of meh end, I'm going to say The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. Now that's the 3rd book in his Thursday Murder Club series. The first one of those I really enjoyed. I thought that the OAP detectives, the amateur detectives, were really charming characters. It was very endearing. The humour really worked, and I found that really fun. But the more the series goes on, the less I'm getting from it, honestly. And The Bullet That Missed, in particular, I found was kind of stretching my patience and my credulity with it. So I have been assured that the 4th book is actually a marked improvement on The Bullet That Missed, but I still disliked The Bullet That Missed so much that I don't know whether I'm going to read the next one. Another personal lowlight, although I read a lot of Terry Pratchett last year, and a lot of it I loved. I've now read like 36 of the Discworld books. So, as I say this with all due love and respect to Terry Pratchett, but I didn't like Eric very much. And to be honest, I don't really like the Rincewind books very much in general. I find, although Rincewind he's a fairly relatable character in terms of just he spends most of his time running away from danger when it approaches. And to be fair, so would I. But I don't find that a particularly compelling thing to read about. But as I say, I generally love Terry Pratchett, so it's not going to put me off reading any more of him. It's just going to put me off rereading that one. Another low light for me was the casebook of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. And this is another one that it's the last in the series. I've read them all now. That was the last one. I read them in order over the course of like a decade. So the earlier, better ones are kind of fading from my memory a bit. But the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, it felt to me like you could tell that Doyle had, at that point, kind of stopped trying, really. There's only one story that I found particularly compelling or inventive or interesting. A lot of the other stuff just didn't really work. Or sometimes kind of felt like it was leaning towards the wrong genre. There are a couple that sort of leaned towards sci-fi for some reason, or sort of supernatural. And also one where Sherlock Holmes himself does not solve the case. It's just someone confessing a crime to him, which, like, what is the point of that story then? Another lowlight from an author I usually love, and that is The Big Four by Agatha Christie. I've just been talking about Agatha Christie as one of my favourite rereads of the year. This was a new read for me, and I thought it was rubbish. Like, this was probably my worst book of the year, honestly. Not necessarily the most disappointing, because I already knew the fan kind of consensus that it's not a good one. But they're right, it's not. It's a mess. It's one of my favourite things about Agatha Christie is following the thread of a single case from beginning to end and seeing how the detective, in this case Hercule Poirot, how he solves it. But The Big Four is essentially a series of short stories kind of mashed together into a novel shape. So it has a sort of episodic thing, a bit like my complaint about Eric, really. There's not a consistent through line, and so each chapter is sort of a separate mystery that gets solved at the end of it, which is leading gradually towards the denouement, but it's just... none of them are interesting, really. In fact, the only one I remember now is... spoiler here, but it's one chapter in a book that I'm telling you is not very good. So, there's one murder which is committed with a chess piece, which, when placed on a certain square, will electrocute someone. That's a fairly ingenious idea. I quite like it, but if it had been kind of stretched out across a whole novel, that might have been more intriguing. But as it was, the concept gets introduced and you pretty quickly work out, oh, I bet it was that, and then it's confirmed that yes, it was that, and then the chapter's over. So it just didn't work for me at all. But coming on finally to my favourite new reads of the year. I'm going to go mad, is what's going to happen. So I'm going to go from 10 to 1, and I'll stop and talk in more detail about specific books if I think they're particularly worth discussing in detail. Otherwise, I'm just going to be saying it's really good and I liked it. Starting at number 10, you've got The Night of the Hunter by Davis Grubb. And if you've seen the film version, it's basically eerily the same. So if you like the film, the book's right there. It's just been republished by Penguin, so it's easier to find. than it has been for ages. It's worth a look. Number 9, we've got The Looking Glass War by John le Carré. And then at 8, we've got A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. At number 7, The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. I've had a really hit or miss year with Ursula Le Guin. Obviously, this is one of my favourite reads of the year. A Wizard of Earthsea was one of my favourite rereads of the year. But I also tried to read The Dispossessed and could not get on with it. I DNF'd it. So, but those 2 books here were more than enough of a reminder of how much I love Ursula Le Guin that I'm not giving up on her. But I think maybe I am giving up on the Hainish cycle. At number 6, we have Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. And then my top 5, we've got at number 5, I Shall Wear Midnight by Terry Pratchett. Number 4, we've got kind of a twofer, that it's Connie Willis with Blackout and All Clear. Now, these are 2 books that are actually one story. It's just that they were too long to publish as one volume. But it's the finale of Connie Willis's Oxford Time Travel series, which started with the novella Firewatch and then the novels Doomsday Book and To Say Nothing of the Dog. I loved all of those. I love these 2. These were considerably longer than any of the other books in the series, especially when you add them together as one. But I just found it gripping from beginning to end. Absolutely loved it. Cried at the end. Great. Now, at number 3, we've got Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is a new author to me, and this is the first of her books in the Farseer trilogy, which itself is the first trilogy in a set of trilogies that cover the Realm of the Elderlings series of high fantasy novels. I was always quite daunted by the length of these books, even though Assassin's Apprentice is considerably shorter than I think any of the other books in the series. I'm actually currently reading the second one, Royal Apprentice, and that's even longer than this. But I'm really glad that I finally got around to reading it. I don't have much to say about it other than I loved it, I'm still loving it, and I'm excited to continue with the series. Now, at number 2, we've got Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This book was intense, but incredible. It's a sci-fi time travel story about a black woman from the late 70s, which is when the book was published, who finds herself mysteriously transported back in time to the early 1800s, the height of slavery in America. And I mean, it's viscerally terrifying, and the brutality and the injustice written about it's intense to read about, and then I kind of feel like a bit of a baby for like complaining about just reading about it, because people went through that, and it's horrifying on a level that I can't even comprehend. And in fact, Octavia E. Butler went on record as saying that the violence and the brutality in this book, if anything, is actually toned down from historical record, because if it was like fully historically accurate, people would not be able to read it. So don't let me put you off reading it, because it is a fantastic book, and it does end on a note of bittersweet hope but hope nonetheless. It's beautifully written, is gripping from beginning to end, and it was just... what more can I say? It's brilliant. And so we come to my favourite book of the year, and that is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Now, if you told me last year that my favourite book of 2023 would be a non-fiction book about fungus, I'm not sure I would have believed you. And part of the reason I wanted to put this at the top of my list is I'd like to let this serve as a reminder to myself that I need to read more non-fiction, because the world of true things is just as strange and fascinating, in fact sometimes more so, than the world of fiction. And I found, like, every chapter I was taking photos of the page to, like, go, oh, well, that's interesting, and, like, sharing it with friends, and it was incredibly engaging. And I never knew that fungus was so fascinating. That's it for my reading wrap-up of 2023. I hope you'll join me next time when I'll be talking about something else. That's how far ahead I've planned. See you then.